the healthy capacity to set boundaries, to express healthy anger when somebody's transgressing, and they take on the needs of others. So that everybody thinks that they're so nice. And when they go to their funeral, how nice they were. And that niceness is what killed them, because that niceness reflected a repression of their healthy anger, you know. So the personality is not who we are. And the problem is, and this is, of course, a spiritual teaching that goes way back to ancient India, at least, that the personality that we develop is not actually the essential ourselves. So modern psychology has beautifully studied and depicted how the personality develops. And the personality develops in interaction with the environment. I'll be very nice, or I'll be very consumed by being attractive, so I can attract attention. To me, this very sad phenomena of people as they age, desperately trying to look younger because they're so identified with their attractiveness. Who am I if I'm not being attractive? But that's a function of their childhood programming reinforced by cultural conditioning. So you have the multi-billion-dollar cosmetic surgery industry. Article in Time magazine today about science is discovering the ways to reverse aging. We just can't accept the reality that we get old. You know what? It's all going to lead nowhere. Because there's such a thing as nature. And the wisdom isn't how to get around nature, is how to align with it. But we don't, in this society, it doesn't get that at all. There's a way of getting old, aging physically, without aging in our essential self and in our minds, so that you can be a very youthful 90-year-old, or you can be a very old 45-year-old, and it all has to do with internal dynamics. So, I'm not even sure what question I'm answering anymore. I'm sure it's a good answer, but I don't know to what.
It was a great answer. And I think it's just important to interlay how the personalities we develop then
right.
become deleterious, obviously, within our experience in ways we're not aware of, that lead to addictions that we can't seem to resolve, right? And you said, don't ask why the addiction, why the pain.
Yeah.
The pains that we hold oftentimes were the origins of the personality being developed in the first place, that persona that we develop, which is a mask.
Yeah.
That is the barrier between us and the wound. So serves as the protection mechanism as it did earlier in our childhood, but then it also becomes the barrier to joy as we age.
Absolutely. And you said it very succinctly. Well, to give you a personal example. So, as a physician, I was a workaholic doctor. Now, I genuinely wanted to serve people. So, wanting to serve humanity wasn't any kind of a false personality trait. It was genuinely expressive of who I am, as of many of my colleagues. But it doesn't operate on its own. It operates in a context, in conjunction with other dynamics that are not so pure. So one dynamic that certainly I could own to is, I really believe that if I go to medical school, I'll have respect. Finally, they'll respect me. Well, why do they even need that? Because I didn't respect myself. So I had to have a stethoscope and the white coat, now I'm somebody. So there's that. Not so healthy. But even more subtle is the need to be needed, the need to be wanted.
Who we are as individuals when we come into the world, we are these, some might say we're connected to our true nature in this blank state. But I actually want to touch on and ask you about intergenerational trauma, because of course, we have the traumas that we've occurred in this lifetime.
Yeah.
But also as a species, as a culture, as a people, African Americans, Middle Easterns, we all have our own individuation of trauma that is within our bloodline. And how do you see that stored in the unconscious? Because let's say I'm in my 20s and 30s and I have I have some sort of repression of emotion or something that I can't necessarily point to an event that happened in my life, and maybe it didn't happen in this life. But how do you see it is everything just coming from this life, or is it essentially the genes and how they impress upon us?
Well, so some people believe in past lives even. My mind has never been able to go there. I usually find it sufficient to look at a person's life in this temporal state and find enough reasons for why they are the way they are. That doesn't mean that past generations don't come into it. But what I am saying is that the effect of past generations is passed on to us in this lifetime.
Yeah.
So now that's the impact of the past, but it's being exerted in this particular lifetime. Then you have what's called epigenetic transmission, which means that the way the genes function, if one generation is traumatized, that alters not the gene structure, but the genetic functioning. And that genetic functioning can be passed on to future generations. That's a new science. I don't think we fully know yet how strong those epigenetic effects are. It's an emerging field. I mean, it's a very interesting research. But in general, and certainly it's already true that when a mother carries an infant, the stresses and traumas that she is burdened with can affect the developing brain and personality of the child already in the womb already. So yes, the experience, and as a Jew, I can tell you that the traumas of previous generations certainly have an impact on, as a part Palestinian, you know the same thing.
Yeah.
And in fact, there's been an unfortunate set of circumstances that have, in my view, imposed the trauma of one people onto another people.
We're here today.
Yeah.
In loving embrace.
Yeah. So the past trauma does happen, and Eckhart Tolle, the spiritual teacher, talks about the pain body, which is really our accumulated traumas that affect us. And he talks about the pain body can exist on a social and historical level as well. So women, because of the persecution of women, the witch hunts, the oppression of women, the rape and so on, women carry that pain body. And certain peoples carry a heavier pain body than other peoples. So yeah, it's all multi-generational. It's all historical. And I think that the effects are always exerted in this particular lifetime.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the middle part of the book, you give so many examples of how the trauma that we store within us lead to the manifestations of illness. For example, racism leading to asthma, or even within culturally, how African Americans deal with hypertension more frequently, and how sometimes we just look at the diagnosis of whatever the disease is and think that that's it. But like, there's all these psychosomatic emotional elements that we just are not aware of, that are often the real reason for why we have the manifestation of a disease or a diagnosis. So is there anything you want to speak to there? Because I thought it was so fascinating, all the examples from gender to race to the different things that we hold within us that create the illness.
Sure. So this is where my profession, the medical profession, is so remiss in its duties, because we have the science now. I mean, we have the science elegantly delineated, showing the unity of mind and body, showing how emotions affect physiology, which also means that our relationships affect physiology, because our relationships program our emotions. So when there's a study that shows that parents whose parents are very stressed, their kids are more likely to have asthma, it's because the stresses of the parents affect the physiology of the child. That's been known for decades. It's not even controversial. And yet, you go to the average physician with asthma, they'll never talk to you about stress. They'll just give you inhalers, which is racism a Black American woman has to endure, the greater risk for asthma. Now, the physiology is very simple. And how do we treat asthma, by the way? You know how we treat it? We give people stress hormones. We give adrenaline and cortisol in the form of injections or inhalers. Should we maybe ask ourselves, gosh, we're treating it with stress hormones? Does stress have something to do with it, maybe? As a matter of fact, if one asks oneself, which medications are used most commonly across the board? If you come in with inflammation of the intestines, as in colitis, or the joints as in rheumatoid arthritis, or the skin as in eczema or psoriasis, or the nervous system as in multiple sclerosis, or the lungs. What do I give people? We give people steroids. What are steroids? They're the stress hormones that our adrenal gland manufactures. Maybe we should see that there's a connection between stress and all these conditions, and there is. So in the 19th century, already identified that multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, and breast cancer were related to stress. They had no science then. They were just giants of medicine with tremendous insight. Since then, there's been 100 years of research showing the relationship between, say, stress, trauma, and rheumatoid arthritis. And there's women, by the way, who develop 70-80% of autoimmune diseases. Nobody understands why. Well, they just happen to be the stress absorbers of their whole families and of their men as well. That's why they have more stress-related conditions such as rheumatoid arthritis, much more. It's also simple, it's also straightforward, and it's called. Their genetic relatives in Africa don't. It's not genetic. So what is it? Well, let's do a simple linguistic exercise. Take the word hypertension and split it. Hypertension, hypertension. Oh, too much tension. Black American kids already have higher blood pressure than white kids. You know? And why? Because of the stress of racism. And all those influences determine our health or our illness.
Once you see it, it's like obvious, right?
Yeah.
Do you feel like the medical professionals is just a problem of ignorance, or is it really malevolent intent from higher up corporations that, I mean, obviously profit from the ongoing cycles of not creating cures, but keeping customers?
Well, it is true that pharmaceutical companies want to create products that people will have to take for a long time. So they're not particularly interested in cures, but they don't even have that vision. But what makes the medical, and there's lots of examples of chicanery in the pharmaceutical industry where drugs are promoted as much more effective than they really are, or the side effects that are known are kind of denied or diminished, So they're not above as any profit-making entity. Their bottom line is profit. Ethics is not high on the list. They're not unique in that, airline industry, the automaking industry, the food industry, the entertainment industry. Ethics isn't, corporate ethics is kind of like a oxymoron, like military intelligence, the two don't go together.
Like you say in the book, it's not like they're trying to kill people. They're just trying to make money. And if they kill people, it's just like a
yeah, they're not trying to kill you. They just don't care if you die. They'll sell you junk foods knowing how harmful they are.
Yeah.
They're not trying to kill you. They're just trying to make money. But they don't care if you die. They don't care. That's not the fault of the pharmaceutical companies. That has to do with both the ignorance and the arrogance of the medical profession. The ignorance comes in not looking at the science that I've been referring to. Not looking at the studies linking multiple sclerosis and stress and trauma, plenty of them. Not looking at the physiology of how trauma inflames the nervous system. Not looking at the physiology of how people traumatized in childhood carry higher markers, inflammatory chemicals in their bloodstream. It's all there. Not looking at how trauma and stress in childhood affects the functioning of one's chromosomes. I mean, the science it's there. So there's a kind of ignorance there. The arrogance is in assuming that doctors don't think they know everything, but the arrogance comes into thinking that what they don't know is not worth knowing. Our science is amazing. Nobody can deny its achievements. Nobody can. It's miraculous what modern medicine can do. It's also very limited. And the arrogance is in not recognizing the limitation.